15 Smallest Economies in Africa. Africa is home to a diverse range of economies, from some of the largest and most developed on the continent to some of the smallest and least developed. While the bigger economies often receive more attention, the smaller economies are also important for their unique characteristics and challenges. Despite their small size, these economies play an important role in the regional and global economy, and their fortunes can have a significant impact on the lives of their citizens. In this video, we will take a closer look at the 15 smallest economies in Africa, examining their key economic indicators, challenges, and opportunities. Though some of these countries have small economies, they however enjoy a better standard of living than some of the bigger economies. Before we dive into the countdown, take a moment and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any of our videos. 15. South Sudan, GDP $4.7 billion. The economy of South Sudan is largely dependent on oil exports, which account for over 90% of the country's total export revenues. However, the country has been facing a severe economic crisis since the outbreak of civil war in 2013, which has disrupted oil production and caused inflation and currency depreciation. According to the World Bank, South Sudan's GDP currently stands at $4.7 billion, which represents a significant decline from its peak of $13.17 billion in 2012 before the Civil War. The country's GDP per capita is approximately $330 as of 2023, which is one of the lowest in the world. The country has been working to diversify its economy beyond oil and to attract foreign investment, but progress has been slow due to ongoing conflict and insecurity. Despite the challenges, there are some signs of hope for South Sudan's economy. In 2023, the country signed a peace agreement that could help to stabilize the political situation, and the government has launched some economic reforms aimed at improving the business environment and reducing corruption. However, it will likely take time and sustained effort to fully recover from the economic damage caused by years of conflict and instability. 14. Eswatini, GDP $4.5 billion. Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland, is a small landlocked country in southern Africa, bordered by South Africa to the west and Mozambique to the east. Eswatini's economy is heavily reliant on agriculture, which accounts for about 60% of employment and around 10% of GDP. The country's main agricultural products include sugarcane, citrus fruits, cotton, and timber. In recent years, the government has been working to diversify the economy and attract foreign investment, with a focus on industries such as textiles, manufacturing, and tourism. However, progress has been slow due to a number of factors, including a lack of infrastructure, limited access to finance, and political instability. Eswatini faces a number of economic challenges, including a high unemployment rate, around 25%, a high poverty rate, approaching 60%, and a heavy reliance on imports for many goods and services. The country is also vulnerable to external shocks, such as fluctuations in commodity prices and the impacts of climate change. Political stability is also a concern, with ongoing tensions between the monarchy and opposition groups. 13. Sierra Leone, GDP $4.1 billion. Sierra Leone's economy is heavily reliant on natural resources, particularly minerals such as diamonds, gold, and iron ore. Mining accounts for a significant portion of the country's GDP. Although the industry has faced challenges in recent years due to falling commodity prices and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, agriculture is also an important sector, employing around 2/3 of the population and accounting for around 20% of GDP. Key crops include cocoa, coffee, palm oil, and rice. The country has also been working to develop industries such as tourism and fisheries. Sierra Leone faces a number of economic challenges, including high levels of poverty and unemployment, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to finance. The country also continues to face the legacy of a long and devastating civil war that ended in 2002, which severely disrupted the economy and social fabric of the country. Political stability is also a concern, with ongoing tensions between the ruling party and opposition groups. 12. Liberia, GDP $3.9 billion. The economy of Liberia is one of the smallest and least developed in Africa, with a heavy reliance on agriculture and limited industrial and service sectors. The country has faced significant challenges in recent years due to a combination of factors, including the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, falling commodity prices, and ongoing political instability. Agriculture is the backbone of the Liberian economy, employing around 2/3 of the population and accounting for around 1/3 of GDP. Key crops include rubber, cocoa, and palm oil. However, the sector faces a number of challenges, including low productivity, limited access to finance, and inadequate infrastructure. Liberia has significant mineral resources, particularly iron ore, but the mining sector has faced challenges in recent years due to falling commodity prices and the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The government has been working to attract foreign investment and develop the sector, but progress has been slow. 11. Djibouti, GDP $3.7 billion. Djibouti is a small country located in the Horn of Africa, bordered by Eritrea to the north, Ethiopia to the west and south, and Somalia to the southeast. Djibouti's economy is largely driven by its strategic location at the intersection of major international shipping routes, with the country hosting one of the busiest ports in the region. The services sector, particularly transport and logistics, accounts for a significant portion of GDP. The country has also been working to develop its tourism sector, with a focus on ecotourism and adventure tourism. Agriculture and fishing are important sectors for employment, but contribute relatively little to GDP. Overall, while Djibouti has made progress in developing its economy in recent years, there is still much work to be done to address the country's challenges and improve the well-being of its citizens. 10. Burundi, GDP $3.6 billion. Burundi is a landlocked, resource-poor country with an underdeveloped manufacturing sector. The economy is predominantly agricultural, accounting for 50% of GDP in 2017 and employing more than 90% of the population. Subsistence agriculture accounts for 90% of agriculture. Burundi's primary exports are coffee and tea, which account for 90% of foreign exchange earnings, though exports are a relatively small share of GDP. Other agricultural products include cotton, tea, maize, sorghum, sweet potatoes, bananas, manioc, tapioca, beef, milk, and hides. Even though subsistence farming is highly relied upon, many people do not have the resources to sustain themselves. This is due to large population growth and no coherent policies governing land ownership. Lack of access to financial services is a serious problem for the majority of the population, particularly in the densely populated rural areas. Only 2% of the total population holds bank accounts, and fewer than 0.5% use bank lending services. 9. Lesotho, GDP $2.4 billion. The economy of Lesotho is based on agriculture, livestock, manufacturing, and mining, and depends on inflows of workers' remittances and receipts from the Southern African Customs Union. The majority of households subsist on farming. The formal sector employment consists mainly of female workers in the apparel sector, male migrant labor, primarily miners in South Africa for 3 to 9 months, and employment by the government of Lesotho. The Western Lowlands form the main agricultural zone. Almost 50% of the population earn income through informal crop cultivation or animal husbandry, with nearly 2/3 of the country's income coming from the agricultural sector. Lesotho has taken advantage of the African Growth and Opportunity Act to become the largest exporter of garments to the US from sub-Saharan Africa. US brands and retailers sourcing from Lesotho include Foot Locker, Gap, Gloria Vanderbilt, J. Penny, Levi Strauss, Saks, Sears, Timberland, and Walmart. 8. Central African Republic, GDP $2.4 billion. The Central African Republic is a landlocked country in Central Africa, bordered by Chad to the north, Sudan to the east, South Sudan to the southeast, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the south, and Cameroon to the west. The Central African Republic's economy is largely based on agriculture, which accounts for around 60% of GDP and employs around 75% of the population. The country's main agricultural products include cotton, coffee, and tobacco. The mining sector is also important, with the country having significant deposits of diamonds, gold, and other minerals. However, the sector has faced challenges due to conflict and limited investment. The services sector is relatively small, but has been growing in recent years. The ongoing violence has also disrupted economic activity, with many businesses forced to close and many people displaced from their homes. The country is also vulnerable to external shocks, such as fluctuations in commodity prices and the impact of climate change. 7. Eritrea, GDP, $2.2 billion. The International Monetary Fund estimates Eritrea's GDP at $2.1 billion in 2020, or $6.4 billion on a PP basis. The economy grew at a 3.9% annual rate from 2010 to 2020, an improvement from the 1.3% annual rate from 2000 to 2010. The pickup in growth has been attributed to the commencement of full operations in the gold and silver Bisha mine, the production of cement from the cement factory in Massawa, and investment in Eritrea's copper, zinc, and colloidal potash mining operations by Australian and Chinese mining companies. Agriculture is the main economic activity in Eritrea. Agriculture makes up 11% of the wider economy's value. Tourism in Eritrea made up 2% of Eritrea's economy up to 1997. After 1998, revenues from tourism fell to 1/4 of 1997 levels. In 2006, it made up less than 1% of the country's GDP. The World Tourism Organization calculated that the country's international tourism receipts in 2002 were just $73 million. 6. The Gambia, GDP, $2.1 billion. The Gambia has a liberal, market-based economy characterized by traditional subsistence agriculture, a historic reliance on groundnuts for export earnings, a re-export trade built up around its ocean port, low import duties, minimal administrative procedures, a fluctuating exchange rate with no exchange controls, and a significant tourism industry. Agriculture accounts for roughly 30% of the gross domestic product, GDP, and employs about 70% of the labor force. Within agriculture, peanut production accounts for 6.9% of GDP, other crops 8.3%, livestock 5.3%, fishing 1.8%, and forestry 0.5%. Industry accounts for about 8% of GDP and services around 58%. The limited amount of manufacturing is primarily agricultural-based, e.g., peanut processing, bakeries, a brewery, and a tannery. Other manufacturing activities involve soap, soft drinks, and clothing. 5. Seychelles, GDP, $2 billion. Seychelles is a small island nation located in the Indian Ocean, northeast of Madagascar. Though it has a small economy, its citizens enjoy a higher standard of living compared to most countries on this list. Seychelles' economy is heavily reliant on tourism, which accounts for around 30% of GDP and employs around 20% of the population. The country is known for its natural beauty and has a thriving tourism industry with around 350,000 visitors per year. The fishing industry is also important, particularly for the export of tuna. Financial services, particularly offshore banking and insurance, also contribute significantly to GDP. The country has also been working to develop its agricultural sector, particularly in areas such as spices, fruits, and vegetables. Overall, Seychelles' economy is relatively small, but has been growing steadily in recent years, with a focus on sustainable development and economic diversification. However, there are still challenges to overcome in order to ensure the long-term well-being of the country's citizens. 4. Cape Verde, GDP, $1.9 billion. Cape Verde's notable economic growth and improvement in living conditions, despite a lack of natural resources, have garnered international recognition, with other countries and international organizations often providing development aid. Since 2007, the UN has classified it as a developing nation rather than a least developed country. Cape Verde has few natural resources. Only 5 of the 10 main islands, Santiago, Santo, Antão, São Nicolau, Fogo, and Brava, normally support significant agricultural production, and over 90% of all food consumed in Cape Verde is imported. Mineral resources include salt, pozzolana, a volcanic rock used in cement production, and limestone. The economy of Cape Verde is service-oriented, with commerce, transport, and public services accounting for more than 70% of GDP. Although nearly 35% of the population lives in rural areas, agriculture and fishing contribute only about 9% of GDP. Light manufacturing accounts for most of the remainder. Fish and shellfish are plentiful, and small quantities are exported. 3. Guinea-Bissau, $1.4 billion. Guinea-Bissau's economy is largely based on agriculture, which accounts for around 60% of GDP and employs around 80% of the population. The country's main agricultural products include cashew nuts, rice, and fish. The fishing industry is also an important source of foreign exchange earnings. The country has significant mineral resources, particularly bauxite and phosphate, but the mining sector is underdeveloped. The services sector is relatively small, but has been growing in recent years. Guinea-Bissau faces a number of economic challenges, including high levels of poverty and unemployment, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to finance. The country is also vulnerable to external shocks, such as fluctuations in commodity prices and the impact of climate change. Political instability is also a concern, with ongoing tensions between the government and opposition groups. 2. Comoros. GDP. $1.1 billion. The Comoros economy is largely based on agriculture, which accounts for around 40% of GDP and employs around 3/4 of the population. The country's main agricultural products include vanilla, cloves, and ylang-ylang. The fishing industry is also important, particularly for the export of tuna. The services sector is relatively small, but has been growing in recent years, particularly in areas such as tourism and financial services. The Comoros faces a number of economic challenges, including high levels of poverty and unemployment, inadequate infrastructure, and limited access to finance. The country is also vulnerable to external shocks, such as natural disasters and fluctuations in commodity prices. Political instability is also a concern, with ongoing tensions between the government and opposition groups. Overall, the economy of the Comoros is one of the smallest and least developed in the world, with significant challenges to overcome in order to improve the well-being of its citizens. The government has been working to attract foreign investment and develop the country's infrastructure and economy, but progress has been slow. 1. Sao Tome and Principe. GDP. $454 million. Sao Tome and Principe is a small island nation located in the Gulf of Guinea, off the coast of Central Africa. According to the International Monetary Fund, IMF, Sao Tome and Principe's gross domestic product, GDP, was approximately $454 million in 2020. Sao Tome and Principe's GDP per capita was approximately $2,255 in 2020, according to the World Bank. This is relatively low compared to many other countries, reflecting the challenges faced by the country's economy. Sao Tome and Principe's economy is largely based on agriculture, which accounts for around 20% of GDP and employs around 2/3 of the population. The country's main agricultural products include cocoa, coffee, and palm oil. The fishing industry is also important, particularly for the export of tuna. The services sector is relatively small, but has been growing in recent years, particularly in areas such as tourism and financial services. Overall, the economy of Sao Tome and Principe is one of the smallest and least developed in the world, with significant challenges to overcome in order to improve the well-being of its citizens. The government has been working to attract foreign investment and develop the country's infrastructure and economy, particularly in areas such as tourism and renewable energy, but progress has been slow. Thanks for watching this video. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos.